Hello and welcome to Well Woman. It's Sulin, your hormone health coach, and thank you for tuning in. If you're looking for the latest advice on women's health, food, mood, tips, hacks, and all the hormone things, you've come to the right place. I hope you love this episode. Let's get to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Well Woman. It's just me today, but I'm so excited to be spending a little bit of time with you. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing information about herbs that you can use to assist you in your grieving processes or your grieving journeys. A lot of us have known loss. I've known loss. I'm sure that many of you are tuning in here thinking, well, maybe this is something I could have used at a time when I really was struggling with grief and loss. I think also when we talk about loss, we think about people that we've lost, but there are many losses that we might experience in our lifetimes. And there are losses that the people we care about and love will also experience. So we want to support them in that loss. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the loss of someone. It could be the loss of something, the loss of an opportunity, the loss of a dream. Perhaps there's something that you've been working towards that didn't come to fruition. Perhaps you've thrown your heart and your soul into creating a business and it didn't work. Perhaps there's an opportunity, a job opportunity that you're really, really wanting. So in the immediacy of the moment, it feels like a big loss, right? So many things that can trigger feelings of grief in us. All of these herbs are going to be useful to you in whatever the situation might be when you're feeling that grief and that loss. So I'm going to launch straight into talking about how I approach working with herbs and grieving. I break grieving down into 4 different realms, and we're going to begin in the first realm. And we're going to talk about some of the herbs that are useful when you're grieving at that stage. The realms correlate with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grieving, for me at least. So it's just my personal take. And so why don't we get started and have a look at these 4 different realms. I like to think this is a kind of a way just to structure things. So we still are coming at this with heart and soul, but to give a little bit of structure will mean that when you hear about all these different herbs, it may not be so overwhelming and it might be easier to choose the right herb for you. So I hope that you enjoy this episode and know that it's there to support you when and whenever you need these herbs. And also great for you to be able to share with a friend or someone that you love if you're wanting to give them the gift of herbs in their times of suffering and loss. A lot of the herbs that I'll be discussing today, they're the ones I've chosen because they take us inwards. And this journey of grieving is very much a journey of moving inwards. And they may just seem like a humble cup of herbal tea, but truth is, with their chemistry and with the way that they affect our central nervous systems and the way that we feel and perceive things, they can really help us through this reflective process. I've worked with each of these herbs personally. I've walked my own path with them, and I truly believe that they are our allies when we really need to surrender to just doing the work within our emotional bodies. Because if we don't process the emotions that we're feeling when we're in grief, they find another way to come out. They cause dis-ease in the body. And so some that I'll mention are more suitable for healing on a physical level. And then there are some herbs which are just simply very soothing. They embrace us with their warmth, their sweetness, they comfort us. There are the treasures, these herbs. And my grieving journey unfolding for herbs, it started a week or so before my father passed away. I was doing a shamanic journey, and in the journey, one of my guides gave me a pink lotus flower. Another of my guides told me to be strong. I didn't realize the significance of these interactions until I received a phone call from my brother. He'd actually left me a message late at night that my father was in a critical condition. He'd traveled overseas, he'd gone to the Philippines, and he was taking on a new job, but I chatted with him not long before that, and he talked about maybe not feeling up to it. And so I think he was a bit conflicted. By the time I called my brother back, my father had had a heart attack. He'd been admitted to hospital, he'd been revived, and he had passed away. So all of this had happened before I actually awoke. And then I realized what my guides were wanting me to be strong for. I looked into the sacred pink lotus. Its botanical name is Nelumbo nucifera. And I found that historically it was entwined with grief. Whether you look at records from ancient Egypt to China to India, throughout the ancient world, there was the use of these lotus flowers, whether they were worn as garlands when a loved one died or passed away. They would have been combined with other flowers like rose, anemone, narcissus. I found that pink lotus was one of our best allies when we were facing the reality of death and loss. And with lotus, you can actually use the flowers to make tea. You can cook up the lotus root as well. It's known to be a very nourishing broth herb, if you like, or broth food. Sometimes you might even go to a sushi bar and get lotus root chips, so they're not as exotic as you might think they are. And like the lotus, it took me into a bit of a journey, because now in this time, this was something I didn't have with my mother when she passed. I wasn't aware of these things, but now this whole world was opening up, and I was discovering that there was a very long history of using herbs, not just as medicines for our physical bodies, but medicines for our grieving hearts. And I knew also that it could be applied to whether you're grieving for the loss of something in your life. It could be someone, it could be something. It just could be the loss of your changing body, the loss of getting unwell and dealing with the symptoms that come with that, just not feeling yourself, the loss of normal and moving into territory where it feels scary. So I started to dive a little bit deeper and look into some of these herbs. I want to tell you a little bit about what I found when I was researching, and listen in for some of the herbs that you may already be using, that you've tried, that you're familiar with, because I can guarantee there will be some that you will say, oh, I know that herb. And I'm going to share with you what ancient history tells us about these plants. Beyond the lotus flower, there are many ancient and sacred herbs associated with death. The Neanderthal peoples, let's say we've got records or evidence dating around 60,000 years ago. So the Neanderthal peoples at this time were using herbs to not only flavor their gourmet meals, and also to heal their bodies from wounds and ulcers and skin afflictions. They were also using them in death, so to perform burials with, and the herbs were buried with the passings of their family members and loved ones. These were herbs like yarrow. Yarrow is a herb that we use, or at least I use it a lot in clinic, to stem really, really heavy periods. So it kind of stops the periods getting too heavy and flooding. Honeysuckle was another one, and cornflowers was another one. And I love cornflowers, actually. I throw them into a lot of things because they make everything look beautiful. And if you like to make your own bath mixes or your own beauty products, infused oils, for example, cornflower is a really beautiful infused oil for your skin. It makes perfect sense that flowers would have been the preferred plant part for burials and funerals, when flowers within themselves, if I'm looking at this chrysanthemum flower and I take it apart, I see inside that we have the seeds of new life. So within a flower, you have the seeds almost for the birth of a new plant, and symbolically the birth for a new life or a new phase of life, right? So if we look at plants like the yarrow and the chamomile, and this one here, the chrysanthemum, we can see all of those seeds. They're too tiny to show you here, but we have all the seeds in there. So I thought that was an interesting thing that I came across. So lotus flowers, honeysuckle cornflower. Archaeologists have also found a lot of the sage species. So this is the salvia species. And they were lining the graves of Natufian people. So this is dating up to around 15,000 years ago now, in what is modern day Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And so the evidence dating back to that time suggests that this civilization had actually really formalized the rituals of burial quite similarly to what we have today. And today, when you go to a funeral, of course, there's a lot of flowers around because we know that this is all in the cycle of life. And nothing teaches us more about the cycle of life than growing plants and seeing flowers emerge and flowers dying and giving way to new colonies of plants. So a couple of days after hearing the news about my father, I made my way to an emporium nearby. I went to buy incense and I went to buy white chrysanthemum flowers. So this was to be the beginning of a new love affair with chrysanthemum flowers. The Chinese name for chrysanthemum, or white chrysanthemum, there's yellow chrysanthemum as well, is Baijiuhua. And forgive my pronunciation if you're thinking how bad that is. Since my father died, I've had this tea regularly. And in the months or so after his passing, I had a cup every day. And I would often make cups for him as well, put it on the altar. So this flower symbolizes death. And it can assist us in our grieving through the initial stages of the grieving journey. It's very fragile, but it's very full and wholesome. And it seemed very fitting also with our family ties to Southeast Asia. This flower is often the flower of choice if you're mourning a loved one in countries like China and Japan. According to the Chinese medicine text, the Bensao Kungxin, which is dated to around 1751, the chrysanthemum flower is thoroughly imbued with the qi of the four seasons. It sprouts in winter, produces leaves in spring, blossoms in summer, and reaches full flower in autumn. It makes me think of other plants that you might describe very similarly. For example, calendula, which is a plant that we use a lot in Western herbal medicine, because similarly, annual lifespan like this and the same sort of flowering timing, as chrysanthemum. And I feel like this very pretty flower was there for me in my initial weeks and months of grieving. And so I formed a bond with them. And you'll find that you do this. When my mother passed away, and some of you might relate to this, it was a very adrenal experience for me. And in that adrenal experience, I found myself running in and out of ICU day after day for a couple of weeks. It got to a point where it was too hard to try to keep her alive, and it didn't feel ethical. So, and she was ready to go. She really wanted to go. But I just remember the toll that it took on my adrenal system. And I actually did form a bond with one herbal tea at the time, and it was black tea. And I'd never been a coffee drinker, never been a black tea drinker. And all of a sudden, I needed this black tea. So if you are going through a grieving process and you're noticing that you're developing this sort of connection with, a milky, nourishing, substantial tea, like black tea with milk, then just know that's probably what your body needs. Right now I would think, black tea, it's okay, but it's not the healthiest choice. Do I have to have it today or not? Especially when I'm putting milk into it and so on. But at the time, it was really the most loving thing I could do for my body, because my adrenals were burnt. They were looking just like shriveled up grapes. And I think they needed that support, a little bit of caffeine, a little bit of milk, the nourishment, the warmth. They needed that. So that was, black tea, milk with my mum, which is interesting because that's the tea she would have drunk. My dad didn't drink those teas. He wasn't, he was Singapore Chinese. He wasn't Australian. And he would have drank this sort of tea. So yeah, that's interesting. Now that's just dawning on me. And so I thought, yeah, this is beautiful. And I want to put these plants in my garden. I want to grow them. I want to develop this beautiful connection even more with this plant. So out of that loss experience came this beautiful connection to the chrysanthemum plant. And I think you know the feeling, right? This, you go through something in your life and you develop a connection to the things that you know will support you. And of course, many of them come from nature. So one of the quotes that I came across when I was researching on plants for grieving at the time was this one. It's by Groves in 2016. Health and disease in the body interact in fascinating, interconnected patterns. And when we make sense of our connection to nature, employing herbs and natural therapies, we can shift those patterns to bring the body into greater balance and vitality. Plants heal, nature heals. It was just a lovely potent reminder of all the times that I'd been feeling terrible and then gone to stand by the ocean and just felt instantly some aspect of healing has been triggered in my body. And you can get that with tea. You can get it going out into the garden, just looking at the trees or looking at the nighttime sky and looking out for stars. You can get that connection going and the process of healing is underway. So with grieving teas, we're going to start on the first realm, but it might be good for me just to give you a couple of pointers with dosage. Now, at this stage, when you're making a cup of tea for healing from grieving, remember that a lot of the processing that's happening in your self is actually very emotional. And herbalists have different ways of approaching dosage depending on the type of effect that you're wanting to get in your body. So I would recommend that you do more of an emotional dosing style, which means you have less of the herb and you have more water. And the chemistry in the herb then doesn't become overwhelming. So you're not really looking for what herbalists and naturopaths would call a therapeutic dose of herbs. It means, I guess this is good, that you can go to your health store and buy your chamomile tea, or you can go to your local Chinese grocery store and buy your chrysanthemum flowers, and you can just have as many as you feel inclined to put into your cup. So it could be 1 or it could be 10, whatever you feel guided towards. And if you have no guidance in that sense and you just want me to give you a number, I would say about 5. So about 5 flowers in your cup, pour on the hot water, let it infuse for about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're not getting too uptight about the actual amount of physical dosage in the plant. We're just being guided by intuition. And if not guided by intuition, then I would say start with 5 and see how that tastes for you. The other thing is, we don't always put honey or milk into our teas in herbalism because we like to get the medicine from the plant, and often we'll make our infusions very strong and very pure. But when you're grieving, just remember that you get different qualities from different ways that you can make your teas. So if you put milk into your tea, it instantly becomes more yin. And the yin, as in yin-yang theory, the yin is very comforting and soothing, and it actually guides you in. And remember, that's kind of what we're trying to do with these grieving herbs. We're trying to bring them into us so that we can move along this process of internal healing and process the emotions. So the addition of milk is actually really nice, and you may not enjoy milk in chrysanthemum tea, but I sure enjoyed my milk in my black tea. And I love a lavender tea with milk and a chamomile tea with milk, so you do have some options there. And similarly, honey also is very yin, so perhaps not as yin, but it definitely does guide the medicine to your digestive system, and it's in our digestive system that we often process a lot of emotions, which is why when we're stressed, we don't digest very well, or when we're ruminating and thinking about things a lot, and you get someone to check your stomach pulse, it's often quite poor at that stage. So I'm getting off track a bit, but just with dosage, I just don't want you to worry too much about having to have any specific dosage. Just be guided by what you feel is right. And when it comes to using the flowers of herbs, remember they're very light. So if you're doing it by weight, then just remember that you're going to get a lot. You're going to get a lot of plant material or flower material for, say, 2 to 4 grams compared to roots and barks. So it's better to just look at it with your eyes, put it in the cup with your eyes rather than measuring it out. Flower essences are a really beautiful way to use the herbs as well, and it's very easy to make a flower essence. You basically just take your flowers, put them in like a bowl of rainwater, spring water, or distilled water, preferably. Leave that out in the sunshine, and the sun will penetrate the plants and release the energy of the plants into the water. You then strain it, and the water becomes your flower essence. You should refrigerate your flower essences, and ideally you should preserve them with some alcohol or brandy. So if you're interested, have a Google, see what you can find on how to make a flower essence. I've actually got a beautiful recipe for a dandelion flower essence in my book, The Wildcraft Guide. So you could use that as a base if you've got that book, and then you can just replace the dandelion with other flowers if you like. It's very important that we don't go to really strong doses of the herbs when we're grieving, because you're then creating a very intense physical dose of the medicine, and that can actually start to obscure the more subtle levels of influence that the herb might have in your body. And so this relates back to some of the writings of Matthew Wood, dating back to 1987, where he talks about the difference between using herbal medicines on a subtle level compared to using them on a physical level. But in the later stages of grieving, when you're starting to get your physicality back and you're feeling stronger and more resilient, you definitely could go to larger doses then. And you might be using herbs like adaptogens to get you back to feeling normal again, getting your energy back, getting your sleep to be deeper. So at that stage, later stages of grieving, it could be fine. The way I've approached this is I'm very much a fan of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's Stages of Grieving. And the stages of grieving, not everybody will move through in a linear way. So I thought I would just correlate each stage. There's a couple of stages that belong to one of these realms, but I would correlate the stages with realms that we can, I guess, relate to more easily. So the first realm is the digestive realm. It's the very beginning of the grieving journey. What happens for many of us is that when we're faced with loss, we initially will kind of shut down. So the way I could describe this, I guess, that a lot of people relate to when I talk to you about this is when my mother passed away 13 years ago, I was in complete agony. It was the most horrible, horrific, traumatizing thing I'd ever experienced in my life. And I just could not imagine going forwards without having a future with her. I'm very sure I've got friends who've lost their mothers in the past 12 months. This is something that a lot of people can relate to. And so the feeling is that within yourself, you are suddenly stuck and you can't move. It's incredibly traumatic to think about moving forwards, but the world is doing its thing. The world doesn't stop. The world keeps pumping away. And there's just this slight kind of disbelief that how can the world keep moving when my world is crushed? This digestive aspect, this digestive realm is not about how well you digest your food, okay? It's only about that in part. It's actually about how you digest the reality of the situation that's occurring. So in the digestive realm, I have herbs which can help with that initial shock and stagnation and trauma that usually sets in the initial stages of the grieving process. So in Kubler-Ross's terms, these stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So usually at the beginning, there will be the denial, maybe the anger. And that's where I see the digestive realm being more relevant. The second realm is the mind. And this is correlated with Kubler-Ross's bargaining stage. And just remember, not everyone goes through these in that linear way. So they might be sort of out of this order, but you can still select the realm that's relevant. And in the mind realm, when we're bargaining, it's where we start to get intellectual with this whole process. And we are just living in this mental chaos. There's a lot of anxiety normally, a lot of questioning of things. and thoughts just going repetitively over and over in our heads. Within this level, we can feel really ungrounded. We can have a lot of resistance to what's happening. So is that aspect of denial here as well. But also, like the body has gone into this state of shock, the mind does something similar. So it gets caught in the repetitive thoughts. And then at the same time, there is a lack of purpose and meaning. So, it's just that, I guess, the bereft, when you think about those terms like bereft and crushed, it's kind of where the mind goes at that stage. And then the other realms are the heart and the adrenals, and they correspond with depression and acceptance in that order. So I'll get back to those a little bit later, but I want to just go straight into the digestive realm. And the herbs that I think are really wonderful for the digestive realm not only work on your stomach function, because that's where we tend to ruminate a lot, in the stomach area, or at least in the energy of the stomach area, but they also do help us to get things flowing and moving within our body. So you have herbs like chamomile and ginger, rosemary, and chrysanthemum to a degree. But those first three herbs, the chamomile, ginger, and rosemary, they have more of a volatile nature to them. So they have the ability as a herb to move quite quickly in the body and to kind of break us out of that stagnation so that we can then feel a little bit lighter about things. We can get our thoughts circulating, our energy moving a little bit better, and we feel just more prepared to be in the present and more prepared, I guess, to process, rather than sitting with the same ruminating thoughts and worrying and feeling like we can't get past what is happening right now or what has happened. So chamomile is a beautiful herb that brings comfort and warmth to your body. A lot of us use it for children who have trouble sleeping or children who are very overactive or hyperactive. So think about how you might be in the stages of initial grieving. If you're struggling to accept the reality of what's happening, it's going to be a very soothing herb for you. And it's one that's very accessible. You can pretty much find chamomile tea anywhere. And like I said before, you don't have to start with any particular dose. Just buy your chamomile flowers dried and use them as you feel guided to use them, whether you put a handful or a teaspoon in your cup or whether you just put a few in your cup. And you can most certainly make a chamomile flower essence. That would be a really beautiful way to work with chamomile. I would suggest that you actually create chamomile lattes. So you take a couple of teaspoons of the herb, you saturate it in hot boiled water, you cover it so that you keep the volatile oils inside, those essential oils. And then once you've let it steep there for about 5 minutes, you move it to a pot on the stove and you pour the chamomile flowers with the water into the pot. You'll notice that the color of the water has taken on the hues of the chamomile flowers, so you know that extraction of those important chemicals has occurred. And then you pour on your milk of choice, and just as much as you need for, a cup or a couple of cups. This will make you a really nourishing chamomile latte. And the magnesium and calcium in the milk, most milks will have some level of that, will also help you to sleep. So a chamomile latte after dinner as your sweet treat, add some honey if you need a bit of extra soothing, is going to work wonders on your nervous system, which will be feeling quite frayed and quite sensitive at this point. And it will help with your digestion, maybe help you go to the toilet the next day, help you feel a little bit less bloated. Because when we get into that initial stage of shock and trauma, our digestion will shut down to a degree and we won't process very well. So we'll usually won't have any appetite because things are slow, things are not processing very well. Or perhaps we go the other way and they are over processing. So the nervous energy is coming out through loose bowel motions and things like that. And then ginger is also really wonderful. If you are, by the way, a woman in midlife, ginger is a wonderful herb, but it's not really an everyday herb. So bear that in mind. Ginger, cinnamon are wonderful for boosting metabolism and energy in the midsection of your body, but they are drying and heating. And that's not particularly good if you're suffering from hot flashes or night sweats. If you're not suffering from those, just go for your life. But if you are, just bear that in mind. And then rosemary, which I always remember is one of Juliet de Barraclou's favorite herbs. I love the way that she talked about it. The dew of the sea is the meaning of the rosemary name, the common name. And it's a very enlivening herb, actually. I think for someone who's going through those initial stages of trauma and shock and feeling quite stuck, it's a wonderful herb to just allow your brain to cleanse itself, to renew your body, because rosemary induces more circulation to the brain, helps you to remove waste materials. So just that cleansing aspect of rosemary is going to be very helpful for you. It isn't necessarily as soothing as the chamomile. It's just working in a different way. And when we feel stuck, things build up in our bodies. So it's good to have herbs like rosemary to help us to remove them. The other herbs that can be very interesting in digestive realm in terms of soothing us, calming us, grounding us, are from the mint family. So rosemary is from the mint family, but so is mint, and so is lemon balm, and they're both really wonderful herbs. They're very gentle. You can also use mint and lemon balm in your cooking. You can add them into most teas, most herbal teas, and they will calm down if you're starting to shift into irritability. Now, irritability is a very forgivable symptom of grieving. And it's one that I noticed particularly strong for me because I really needed a lot of space to process what was happening for me. So with my mother, I got really, really irritable because I just had to have some outlet for all that stagnated energy, I guess you could say. Mint and lemon balm are perfect for if you're experiencing those emotions and you want some herbs that are cooling on your liver and will cool down the livery constitution. And they will also at the same time reduce your stagnation. So mint, very good. And lemon balm also. Both aromatic plants have the capacity, perhaps not as strongly as ginger or chamomile, but they have the capacity to gently move things through your body, help you to shift emotions that have to find other healthy ways of coming out of you, apart from you screaming at everyone around you and getting really irritated by everything they do. And this brings me to that one herb that I really fostered a deep connection with, and that was chrysanthemum. So what I like to do, this is the recipe that I have on the blog, is I take a few flowers, like it could be 5 or it could be even just a few like that, 3. And you combine that with a little bit of mint or lemon balm. It goes really, really well with those minty flavors. And you pour some hot water on there, and you might even put some honey in the tea. And you just let it sit there for 5 to 10 minutes, longer if you like. And then you strain out the flowers and you drink the tea. So the next realm that I'd love to go into is the mind realm. Let's have a look at some of the herbs that are useful for the mind realm. Okay, so one of the principles of using herbal medicines to affect your mind is that the ones I find most effective are the aromatic herbs. And this is because they contain these pungent chemicals called volatile oils. And the volatile oils are actually what give them their smell. So, for example, the lavender flowers are so aromatic, absolutely beautiful. And what happens with that smell is you'll take it in and it might move through the body quite quickly. It will just disperse like that. And a lot of them will rise up in the body. So the direction of movement for these aromatic plants is often up, particularly with some like these. So lavender is one of the herbs that you can use if you're kind of stuck in that mind realm. And this is where you've got the thoughts on loop, a lot of ruminating, a lot of worrying, anxiety, maybe panic attacks, and everything's kind of going on up here. So it's like you're a talking head, if you like. Yeah. So you might have your body and your legs to walk on, but it's all happening up here. And so the fumes, the volatile oils come up and they just permeate through the mind and they help really clear our mind. This is also why you might use lavender, for example, the essential oil for headaches, because it's kind of allowing the escape of all of that stuck energy in the head. So with the mind realm, that is one of them. And chamomile can also do that to a degree. Chamomile works a little bit differently, but if you've got those ruminating thoughts on loop, chamomile helps to take the angst out of it, so it's that soothing aspect of the chamomile coming in there. And some other herbs that I really like here are tulsi, which is holy basil. I absolutely love tulsi with rose. That's a really beautiful combination. And if you know someone who's going through loss, give them a tulsi rose tea. Like you don't even have to explain what it's doing. Just, this is how you can care for people that you love. Because when people, tell us about things that have happened and sometimes awful traumatic things, we don't know what to say. Give them a tea. It's a really, really beautiful gesture. And then another herb that I really love here is skullcap. And skullcap is very similar to some of these other mint family plants that I've been talking about in terms of its design. Right? It looks a lot like a mint family plant. It's very delicate. It has beautiful pastel colored flowers. It's not as aromatic, but it has, you can tell from the leaf shape, right? It has the piercing quality. Skullcap, however, is deeply sedating. So this is one that you might bring in at nighttime. For example, you may be using the lavender and the chamomile in the morning, and that helps you get through the day to cope with the repetitive thoughts and the stress and anxiety that they're bringing upon you. And at nighttime, you would have the skull cap, because the skull cap resonates a lot with the yin quality in the body. And some people will actually find it too yin, too deep, too heavy, too wet. But you want to kind of encourage that when you're sleeping, because you want to go into this cool state, inward looking. You want to feel heavy, like you're returning to the earth. And skullcap will help you to do that. So with that particular herb, dosage is similar. Just make yourself a cup with a tablespoon of leaves and away you go. Tastes beautiful. Add a bit of honey if you like. So you've got a few herbs there that can work at different times of day on this mind realm. And similar to skullcap, if you're finding that you're actually not sleeping very well because of feeling stuck in your head around this loss that you're grieving, then valerian could be another option for you, as long as you don't suffer from anxiety and panic attacks. So valerian can sometimes highlight those neuroses and anxieties, and it suits people who just have a little bit of stress to unwind, but haven't been holding stress in their bodies for year after year. So you can use valerian if it's just this, acute sort of stress that you're experiencing. Just be aware that valerian will help you to dream your stresses away. So what I mean by that is when you're dreaming, you will have more vivid dreams, and those dreams might actually cause you to feel scared, alert, very alert, heightened emotions. You might feel excited. You might feel anticipatory anxiety. So it will bring up a lot of stuff, but that's the stuff that has to move as well. So it depends how you look at it, I guess. Some people find valerian gives them a heightened, anxious feeling through the day. If that's the case, don't use it. Why put your body through that? Because clearly what your body is wanting is the chamomile soothing approach. So chamomile and lavender and another herb. Actually, yeah, maybe not so great, that one. I won't mention that one. Because you can get a kind of opposite effect with that one as well. But that's the mind realm. So for many of us, we start our grieving journey in either one of those realms. We kind of shut down and go stagnant in the body, or we shut down, go stagnant in the mind, and then loops start going of thoughts, repetitive thoughts. So when we start getting into the next stage, it's the heart realm. And the heart realm correlates with Kubler-Ross's depression stage. So in the heart realm, it's very much about feeling. You know, there's a saying in Chinese medicine that all of the organ systems, they have associations with particular emotions. For example, in the lungs, it is with grief, right? In the stomach, it's worry. In the liver, it can be anger, but I feel like in the liver, it's very much just emotionality, full stop. Kidneys, fear, you know, so there's this kind of that association model that we've known about for a very long time. So I feel like with the heart, while all of those other organ systems are working through their individual emotions, the heart is actually feeling all of those emotions. It's a very vulnerable part of our entire self and system. So when we go through loss and the grieving process, there is this kind of like heart fatigue that sets in, because the level of feeling that our bodies are going through and the amount of processing that they're having to deal with is just so overwhelming. And we can feel heartbroken, we can feel crushed, we can feel helpless, we can start to mistrust, we can feel like we're withdrawing. And within that sort of, I guess, emotional realm, we also can get really low and flat, low motivation, low mood. So this is the heart realm that we're moving into. And when it comes to the medicines for the heart realm, there are a couple of things they all share in common. So one of them is that a lot of them will have the red color, which is significant in itself, relating to the blood. Okay, so it is the blood that nourishes the heart. I mean, blood nourishes us all, but it's moving through the heart. It's the life force. It keeps the heart pumping. And without it, the heart would be an empty vessel. So a lot of them are red. And then the other thing is that a lot of them are actually deeply calming. So let's have a look at some of these beautiful heart herbs. Now, one of them is rose. So one of them is rose. I have to say that again because I made a bit of noise there. Don't know how much noise the mic is picking up. The rose flowers are just so... Oh, they're just, it's like smelling sweet earth. This is yin. This is the yin quality. When we're going through loss, at least when I was younger, if I ever had some loss, even in my 30s, I would just hug my mum. That's what it feels like. It's nature holding us. So red roses, could be different colored roses, but particularly the color red will have that strong affinity with the heart. And another herb, actually from the same family, the rose family, is hawthorn. Hawthorn, you might have heard about it because it helps to stabilize blood pressure a little bit, brings the blood pressure down. It's so effective that in a lot of studies, when you use it in combination with pharmaceutical blood pressure medications, it can be tricky because it gives you this amplified effect. So very effective at bringing blood pressure down. But the berries of the hawthorn plant have long been used actually in ritual and ceremony, even in herbal magic, if you like. And they are very healing for the heart too. So you've got your hawthorn berries, bright red, got your rose flowers, bright red, all very healing for that sort of heartbroken feeling and that flatness that can set in when the heart has been open, it has felt, it has been injured and wounded, and now it's sort of in that very raw and fragile state. The other thing that can sometimes happen with this heart, at this heart realm level, is we can feel like our heart immediately closes. So it's just this protective mechanism. And we might close off from the world. We might sort of disconnect. And we need that time to be able to just be, just sort of sit with what's happening and what we're feeling. We might feel incredibly uneasy under the surface. We might feel like something just isn't right. And basically we've moved into a state of disharmony. So what we do require from the herbal medicines that can support us in this stage, herbal medicines, or even just plants in general, that have the ability to ground us and to connect us to the earth. Another, I guess, way of saying that is the plants that create that feeling of the mother. So motherwort is interesting. The two that I really wanted to talk about were motherwort and marshmallow. And motherwort, you can tell from the name, has connotations with mothering. Marshmallow, you wouldn't think it, but originally in the mid 1900s, marshmallow was used to help mothers bond with their babies. Yeah, so marshmallow itself is very beautiful for that bond creation. So think about now, for me, it was the loss of my mother, and I had to learn to be my mother to myself now. So think about how we can use the herbs at that time where we're going through this incredible emotional journey. We're surrendering the physical body of our mothers, but we're retaining the connection. And we are, in a way, finding that within ourselves as well. It's very beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that we do. And these herbs can help you. Marshmallow root is very sweet. It's very calming. It's very soft. It's what we call demulcent in herbalism. So you can put your marshmallow root into a cup of cold water, leave it in the fridge overnight, and sip at it the next day. You don't have to cook it up on the stove, even though you can. You don't have to even make it with hot boiled water. You can just put it into cold water, leave it to do its thing, because the chemicals it contains, they prefer generally cold water, and they take time to extract into the water. So you can give that time. You can make your own marshmallow lollies, even if you have children that are suffering a loss of some form. You can make them little natural marshmallows using the extract from marshmallow tea. And the other one, motherwort, is also a beautiful herb that you can just make, just like the chamomile and the mint and the chrysanthemum. You can just basically put your leaves into water and you can make it up like a hot infusion. So yeah, there are a few herbs there that will be very supportive and very acknowledging of all of the emotional depth that you might be experiencing when you're sitting in that heart realm. So we've got one more realm to have a look at now, and then we'll wrap up. And this last realm, when we move beyond the heart realm, is the adrenal realm. So you can see in this image here, in the adrenal realm, which in my mind, I was thinking this is actually about vitality, life force. If you're looking at it from an Oriental perspective, it's kidney jing, kidney chi. It's like that vital essence that we're kind of now in the stages of getting over things a little bit. So we're starting to come back to feeling normal again. And however, we don't have a lot of vitality. So that's what we're trying to, we're struggling with that. So in this adrenal realm, it corresponds with the stage of acceptance. In this stage, we're usually thinking, I'm ready now to move on to something new. I'm ready to move to the next phase. And there's a little bit of surrender in that, because the stuckness, the stagnation, the resistance, we're surrendering those things as we move into an acceptance stage. In our bodies, physically, we're convalescing. We tend to think about convalescence as relating to a physical illness or disease, and we're affected by this. For example, an infection takes us a while to get over. We convalesce, then we come back to normal. But emotional dis-ease is very much a thing. So the grieving process can be thought of as a condition of dis-ease as well. And we are working ourselves back to feeling normal again. So we are convalescing and we're really, really tired. A lot of people are very tired. So it is incredibly important with the grieving that you can allow yourself, or you can give to someone who's going through this, you can give them a lot of space and if they want it, and a lot of time. Expectations need to be very low, including the expectations we put on ourselves to get back to life as normal. We need to have really good boundaries because we still are convalescing. I think about the adrenal realm, the stage of acceptance, as also being the tired realm. So the plants here are very nutritious plants. They are plants that help us to kind of get that lift and tone in our bodies and in our minds. And they're herbs like raspberry leaf and nettle, which are often used in pregnancy to assist with the strength of the pregnancy and breastfeeding as well. And shatavari, which is a very yin, very nourishing plant. Cacao is another beautiful one for the tired realm because it's naturally got a little bit of rejuvenation in it, a little bit of stimulation. And then we have plants like elder and oat straw. So in the tired realm, because grieving is so emotionally tiring, we need to choose plants that are not just going to make us feel a certain way, but we need the plants that have that ability to build our sustenance and bring us a lot of strength and resilience. And often it's the exhaustion from heartbreak, And so we want to combat that stress and exhaustion. And we look to two classes of herbs, the nutritives and the tonics. The adaptogens come in here as well because adaptogens are tonics. So if you do love your ashwagandha and if you do love your reishi mushroom and you love particular adaptogens that have become very popular these days, they're the ones that you would call on at this stage. I should also say, actually, reishi, I would suggest looking into the history of reishi as a spiritual support throughout all the stages of grieving. This realm is about acceptance, and we have stopped resisting what's happening. So when we stop resisting, everything in our bodies just opens up, which means we're now at a state where we can absorb nutrition. And you might find if you've been through a grieving process that's quite long, by this stage, you've probably lost a bit of weight or you've lost tone. Okay, so you would have lost something in the body as well as losing something in your physical world or your emotional world. And right now at this stage with acceptance comes the ability to take in nourishment from the outside. So social connection is very important here. Doing things you love, finding hobbies, if you love playing the piano, get yourself a piano again. If you love drawing, buy yourself a pad, even start with like coloring in. And Deborah Duval's episode on Well Woman is just so beautiful. Give you a couple of practices in that you can even start doing right now. Get out your inner artist. So this is the time where you're actually in a very fluid relationship with your environment, whereas before you've been, in a way, protected against the environment, which would have seemed very harsh at the time. And dandelion root and dandelion leaf can also be really wonderful here because they're very rich in nutrients. So nettle and dandelion leaf are probably the two that I would say would make amazing everyday tonics and herbal teas. You'll get a lot of fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins from them, and you will get a good deal of protein as well, particularly from nettle. You can read up about a lot of the protein-rich plants in my Wildcraft guide. It is such a wonderful book, everybody. I know that I'm biased, of course, but it is literally 10 years of my love affair with wild growing medicinal plants. And there are a lot of plants that are probably growing near to you that can help you. Nettle and dandelion are both in the book, and you will discover that they are an incredible source of protein and nutrition for us. An ancient plant that was often used for the later stages of grieving is the elder plant. You might have heard of elderberries, such as mixing up an elderberry syrup in winter for coughs and colds. You might have heard about elder flowers, which are, again, so beautiful, but more focusing on the upper respiratory symptoms, such as a runny nose, sore throat, etc. I love both of them. Elder helps us to surrender and accept. So it's a natural plant support for this stage. And, it's just a very rounded and hearty medicine that it's the medicine we need at this stage of loss and grieving. So if you head to my blog and you want any of the recipes that I've mentioned today, including a recipe for a syrup that you can make out of elderberries and elderflowers, then jump onto the blog at herbalwell.com.au. That's herbalwell.com.au. And you'll find it on the blog. Just search for Grieving. On that note, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today on Well Woman. I've been really wanting to record this for a long time. It took me a couple goes, to be honest, because I kept getting really emotional. Herbs have been here for me in my toughest moments, and I wish you that as well. Have a beautiful day. See you soon on another episode of Well Woman. Thank you for listening to the Well Woman podcast. The information, opinions, and advice in this podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice, and it's for general information and educational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast may not always be those of the host. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon in another episode of Well Woman.